your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. This past week, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney rejected calls for a hard lockdown during an appearance on a radio program. Alberta's former top doctor signed a letter calling for an immediate firebreak measure to help deal with the surge in COVID-19 cases. But Kenney told radio host Roy Green that a lockdown would make no sense for 80% of the population that is already vaccinated. Kenney says those who are vaccinated are much less likely to transmit the virus and are far less likely to be hospitalized. Former Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. James Talbot, is calling for closures and restrictions for a minimum of 4 weeks on bars, gyms, indoor dining facilities, and sport facilities. He's also calling for the transfer of ICU patients to other provinces in order to relieve pressure on Alberta's hospitals. But Kenney says his government needs more time to see if recent public health rules are working.
Throughout this pandemic, we have worked hard to vaccinate as many people as possible. More than 1,400 pharmacies, along with AHS clinics and doctors' offices, continue to administer COVID-19 vaccines across the province. To encourage Albertans to get their shots, we created rapid flow-through clinics when we were at the peak of vaccine demand. We developed the strongest incentive programs in Canada and created a new billing code for physicians to reach out to unvaccinated patients. We are monitoring the trends and the numbers very closely every day. If we need to take additional measures, we will, but they have to be effective.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Ottawa is prepared to help Alberta through another economic lockdown if needed. Trudeau says federal support for businesses and individuals would kick in if the province decided to shut down to try and bring down its increasing COVID-19 cases. Trudeau says he'll be speaking with Premier Jason Kenney about that possibility. The Alberta Medical Association says hospitals can no longer provide normal standards of intensive care because of a shortage of specialist staff. The association says demand for critical care is high due to the number of COVID-19 patients assigned to each nurse has been increased. The group says the situation could lead to doctors having to make decisions about who receives life-saving treatment. The concern has been raised in a public letter from the association's intensive care doctors about the COVID-19 health crisis that has left Alberta's hospitals overwhelmed with patients. The COVID-19 pandemic has more than highlighted the systemic staffing shortages at Alberta hospitals. Premier Jason Kenney now says the Canadian Armed Forces and the Canadian Red Cross are sending medical staff to help alleviate the staff crisis and assist with care for hospitalized Albertans. Most of the 20 Red Cross medical workers will be deployed to central Alberta. Newfoundland and Labrador is sending a medical team to assist in Fort McMurray.
I can announce that we are finalizing arrangements to welcome a team of medical personnel from the Canadian Armed Forces. We understand that they may be able to provide 8 to 10 ICU-trained staff, which would help us to staff up to 2 additional ICU beds. In my conversation with the Prime Minister yesterday, I said that every bit helps, and we truly appreciate the assistance. This team will likely be located at Canadian Forces-based Edmonton, supporting Edmonton area hospitals where the need is greatest in those hospitals in the Edmonton area which have the greatest need. We're also working with the Canadian Red Cross to welcome up to 20 trained staff, some of whom will have general training and some of whom may have ICU experience. These staff will likely be asked to help at the Red Deer Regional Hospital, which is under severe stress given low vaccination rates in rural central Alberta. Finally, we are completing plans with the province of Newfoundland and Labrador to welcome a medical team, which we expect will include about 5 or 6 ICU experienced staff who will likely be deployed to the Northern Lights Regional Health Centre in Fort McMurray.
There's some great news for our province's energy sector this week. The Enbridge Pipeline 3 is now live and has begun delivering Alberta crude to the United States.
This is the first new pipeline project that's come into service since 2010, and it's going to increase takeaway capacity by 370,000 barrels a day. This is terrific news for Alberta. It's terrific news for our energy sector to get that increased market capacity.
And as you know, it's so important for Alberta to get more pipeline capacity built so we can export more of our world-class energy, but also reduce the price differential so we get more value for Alberta energy. It's good for Alberta jobs, it's good for provincial revenues, it's good for the long-term prospects of our industry, because it says to those special interests that have been trying to landlock our energy that we will continue to build, to produce more and to ship more to fuel growing demand and do it in an environmentally responsible way.
Coming up, Jeanette Rocher chats with an Edmonton woman who's already been fired for not being up to date with her mRNA shots. There's been a lot of discussion recently about companies and government agencies requiring staff to receive the experimental mRNA COVID-19 vaccine shots as a condition of employment. Well, Alberta government agencies have given staff until the end of November to become compliant. One Edmonton organization has already begun releasing unvaccinated staff. BCN's Jeanette Rocher interviewed one of those employees who was quite upset.
Thanks so much for being on the show. It's great to meet you.
Thank you. You as well.
First of all, tell me what happened. What was your job? What's your background? What were you working at when this happened?
So I've been working in fund development for 17 years now. And so I took a job at this organization in January. So I was quite new to the organization. And so I basically do all the fundraising, the events, the donations, the donor relations. And so basically I'm the money person behind the organization. Right. And that's what I've been doing for a very long time.
Yeah, that's a really important job. Are you able to name the organization?
Yeah, it's iHuman Youth Society. And so we work with inner city youth and vulnerable young adults that come in and they get treatment from basic needs to drug rehabilitation, all the way to arts and music and rehabilitating them from the beginning to the end. So a very wonderful organization and does a lot of great work for the inner city.
So Lisa, obviously it's a very important organization you work for. You had a very important job. So what happened? What was the crux of this issue? You wanted, they were asking you to be vaccinated. What exactly happened?
So last Friday, we were all called into a staff meeting. We were put in a circle. It was kind of strange. And we were told by the very new director that's there that, we were very appreciated and she loved us all. It was a very big speech. And then said that we have decided that we are going to follow the government mandate. And as of Monday, if you're not double vaccinated, you will have to take an unpaid leave. And either when the mandate's lifted, you can come back, or for you to get time to get your stuff together. So obviously there was a lot of shock. A lot of people were upset because not everybody is vaccinated. It was a very heated exchange between some of the staff and the director. And she also said it was not up for discussion, which I found very strange because you just brought this into the workplace and people's livelihoods. And then to say, we're not talking about it. And so I had brought up the thing was, well, most places would give people more time than just Monday and have over the weekend to be double vaccinated, which is actually impossible anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
And I'm not going to be a person that's, yeah, it's, and then she said, well, we had given you guys lots of time. I'm like, well, this mandate just happened right now. So there was no time. Yeah. And so it was very heated and a lot of people were very upset. And they also wanted to bring this very same thing on with the young people that are coming through the door. Some are homeless, some are on the streets. And the last thing they're thinking about probably at their day is to get a vaccination. They're probably thinking, hey, I just want to eat today. Right. So they didn't make this decision yet, but they definitely made it for the staff.
Okay. Well, I can understand the shock and the surprise. They tell you this on Friday. Yeah. And they're saying by Monday you have to be doubly vaccinated. Like you said, that is impossible to have done. Yeah. Most employers, it seems, are giving people until a November 1st deadline or anything. There was nothing like that at all.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
there was nothing in writing. There was no formal email. There was absolutely nothing. So I had. After the meeting, it was very, like I said, it was very heated. I talked to the director actually in the kitchen and I said, you have to give people some ample time. This is their livelihood. To say you can't come back with pay on Monday is kind of short notice. And she's like, well, we're going to have a meeting and it's very unprofessional, right? We're going to have a meeting and then we'll probably extend it till Friday. And then the email came out a few hours later saying you had till Friday, but even still, that's a week. And again, it's impossible to be even double vaccinated in a week.
Yeah. What would you say to other other people that are in this situation?
Well, I'm very vocal on social media and I always stand up for, like I said, whatever is right. And I would say not back down. It's very hard, especially when your livelihood is at stake. I am pretty much the sole breadwinner for my household. And so this will definitely make an impact. But at the same time, I'm like, I just have to say what's right. What the government is doing is absolutely absurd. But also employers choosing to go this path or having business owners not letting patrons to come in. I mean, my goodness, where are we? Where are we right now? Like, it's just hard to believe, but to stand up and not back down regardless.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for your time. Appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
We reached out to iHuman Services, but the organization did not respond to our request for an interview. A leadership review for Premier Kenney is coming up next spring. Our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson will have details for us next. You can add one more item to Premier Jason Kenney's plate, and that's that his caucus and constituency association members who have been questioning his leadership. There are those who are looking to fill the Premier's spot, but is this a little too soon for the Alberta United Conservative Party? We chatted with our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson to get his thoughts. Tyler, Premier Kenney is now saying the United Conservative Party is united once again.
We will have to see how long that lasts. As you said, there was a caucus meeting last week, and there were all these rumors sort of circulating beforehand that suggested he was going to take a knife and that the caucus was going to bring him down. And of course, people will remember that this is how, it's gone for pretty much everybody. Ralph Klein dealt with this, Alison Redford dealt with this, Jim Prentice less so, but Ed Stelmach as well. Every Conservative leader, it seems to have problems in their caucus. And as it turned out, they didn't go ahead with a non-confidence motion in Kenney's leadership. And, about 40 people spoke in favor of the Premier. Of course, you take the 7 or so, maybe 10 or so people who spoke against him, and you have a 60-person caucus, of course. So you still have sort of a wild card number of people out there. But certainly he has lived through the day and survived that. Although I'm positive we have not heard the end of some of the internal caucus drama over his leadership.
So when Rachel Notley was Premier with the NDP, did she run into non-confidence issues as well with her leadership?
If she did, it was certainly not a very leaky ship. I have no memory of her facing issues like that. I mean, I can think of a few times when she faced some sort of internal drama. For example, there was the sexual misconduct scandal that sort of rocked her caucus a little bit that I think was problematic for her leadership. But in terms of people, sort of fully turning on her and demanding she resign, I can't think of an instance of that in the time that she was Premier.
Okay, let's circle back to Premier Kenney for just a moment here. And there is likely a leadership review of Premier Kenney coming up, I believe, next spring. Now, the timing is not clear, nor is the format, but some constituency associations are not placated and still want it to happen sooner rather than that.
That's right. So one of the outcomes of this sort of caucus drama was that Jason Kenney spoke to the party executive and said, I would like a leadership review and let's hold it in the spring. Now, everyone is sort of assuming that means it's going to be at the party's annual general meeting in March. But of course, spring doesn't end until summer starts, which is June 21st or something like that. Right. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there for the Premier and his loyalists if they so desire. But the constituency associations have some power over all of this, given some of the sort of internal wizardry of the UCP constitution and laws and stuff like that. So there are still some people who are agitating, trying to get over the threshold of constituency associations that want a review to happen sooner, and that could potentially force a review to happen sooner. Whether or not they get to that threshold, whether or not any of those things happen, of course, is still up in the air. But at this point, we can say with, some degree of certainty that Jason Kenney is going to face a leadership review in the spring and perhaps even sooner than that.
Now, there's a movement afoot, Tyler, in our province led by former Airdrie MLA Rob Anderson and independent Medicine at Cypress MLA Drew Barnes called Free Alberta Strategy. What is it all about and what do they hope to achieve?
It's sort of another iteration of some of the Western alienation Alberta independence stuff. Now, viewers of a certain age will perhaps remember the Sovereignty Association proposal that was in Quebec in what must have been 1995. And it's sort of similar to that. So basically what they are proposing is that the Alberta legislature passes an act, an Alberta Sovereignty Act, I believe they've called it, and it would essentially say, we don't need to listen to federal laws. We're going to make our own provincial laws, and we're going to have our own provincial police force to follow them, and things like that. Now, of course, that would lead to presumably some sort of a constitutional crisis, but it is, I would say, notable because the Western alienation thing that we were all discussing, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, seemed to have really faded out during the pandemic, and this has now come sort of roaring back. And of course, in a couple weeks' time, when the municipal election comes around, there's going to be the referendum on equalization. So it's good timing, I think, on this group's part to bring these things back up for conversation. But not to be too long-winded with you here, the other thing is that we just had a federal election, and we had the Maverick Party running on, a very sort of pro-Alberta sort of platform, and they didn't do very well. So it does sort of make you wonder just how high the wave is right now on Western alienation. So it's just another factor to consider in all this.
Yeah. Our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson, thanks so much again for your time today.
Always a pleasure, Hal.
Coming up, a look at the Southern Alberta Truth and Reconciliation activities that took place this week. Stay tuned. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation took place on September 30th, with events happening around the province at various post-secondary institutions. Micah Quinn explains now how the University of Lethbridge honored the day to pay tribute to those who were found in unmarked graves.
So this is the handprints in memory on the U wall here.
Students at the University of Lethbridge were able to leave an orange handprint to get involved with Reconciliation Week at the university and to show that the impact of residential schools are still being felt by the student body.
They were also allowed to leave the names of the folks that were impacted by residential schools, but we just wanted to be able to just show the campus community that it's not something that's in the past. This was a generation ago. My eldest brother, who's barely 40 now, he attended LeBret Residential School. So that was the last one that was closed in '96. So the impacts are still very much here.
The Orange Ribbon Memorial event also took place at the university, where 600 ribbons were cut to allow students to tie and leave one to remember the impact that residential schools had on Indigenous families.
Yeah, I think it's really important for institutions to do the work when it comes to Truth and Reconciliation Day, come up with ideas, consult elders, pay honorariums, just so we can acknowledge and pay respect to the victims and survivors of residential schools.
The theme of the event was, "We do not give up on them."
There is great awareness that is offered throughout the week, but really an interactive way to bring together students with common knowledge of the issue at hand with the recognition of the TRC.
There will be other events going on for Reconciliation Week at the University of Lethbridge until September 30th. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Now, still at the university, Lindy Shade, manager of the Indigenous Student Centre at the U of L, says the week brought light to the generational trauma and pain caused by the abuses endured at Canadian residential schools.
It's really around respect and honoring the hardships of the intergenerational traumas of our parents, our grandparents. It's a very emotional day. And I find that a lot of Indigenous people, especially within the Blackfoot territory, is really around honoring, respect, and acknowledgement of some of the different, the dynamics and for our, what they went through when they're in residential school. And so it's really, it's an emotional day, basically. It's an emotional day around, just kind of remembering. It's a day of remembering and reflection.
Now, there were other groups around the city that hosted events commemorating truth and reconciliation, including Lethbridge College. As Carson Marsuki explains now, the facility featured major events, including the unveiling of the Coming to Know and Learn Coulee Walk.
In recognition of Truth and Reconciliation Week, Lethbridge College unveiled a new Coming to Know and Learn Coulee Walk, where people can explore the coulees near the college while learning about the land we are on. Artist of the Coulee Walk project, William Singer III, says the walk is a self-guided tour that explores the traditional plants found in the area and their uses, and share some of the traditional creation stories of the Blackfoot Confederacy.
The title, it's Sini, and that's coming to know. And this is where a lot of our knowledge was well retained. We got it from the ground, like it all came from the earth. That's our knowledge.
The group has been working on the walk for over 2 years. There are multiple signs along the path representing different elements of the Blackfoot Métis culture.
It's a series of 12 signs. 3 of them are introductory signs that relate to the creation and the cosmos. And the remainder are the different plants that you can see throughout the coulee here.
The Coming to Know and Learn Coulee Walk is in collaboration with the college and Indigenous community.
Well, the country, they understand, like all Indigenous peoples, they have their own systems, and it's all land-based. So this is what we're bringing to light, because what you see here is a college, Western institution, and what you see out here is the Indigenous institution. So this is where a lot of the Indigenous people got all of their knowledge, and we still do that to this day.
On Wednesday, the college is set to host Dr. Wilton Littlechild, a Cree chief, residential school survivor, and lawyer, who will talk about and recognize the importance of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. For Bridge City News, I'm Carson Marceau.
In July of this year, Alberta's UCP government implemented the Residential Schools Community Research Grant. Now, the money provided $8 million in funds to be used for Indigenous-led research and related activities associated with the deaths and undocumented graves and burials at the Alberta residential school sites. There are 25 federally funded and church-run residential schools that were opened across Alberta between 1872 and 1975. Coming up, we'll feature some of the top local stories from across southern Alberta. Stay tuned.
That complaint is based on the subsequent results and the deterioration in services that has occurred in our communities and the risk to patients.
Welcome back. The City of Lethbridge has made the decision to implement a mandatory vaccination policy for all city staff. The city says its goal is to protect the safety and health of all of its staff and the community. All staff will have until November 15th to be fully vaccinated. City Manager Craig Dalton says he acknowledges that there may be some employees unhappy about the decision, but says the risk of not taking this step was far greater than the objections that may be raised.
Our intent is clearly for staff to comply, and so we'll work to that end, and we'll work with individual staff to hopefully realize that if there are staff who for whatever reason don't feel they can comply, then we'll have conversations with those individual staff members, and a number of steps that we think we can take. The intent of this policy is not to terminate staff. The intent of this policy is to move towards mandatory vaccination and a status or a state where all of our staff are vaccinated.
Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services staff are now required to be fully vaccinated by October the 31st. All employees at city-owned facilities such as the Enbridge Centre will also need to receive the jab. Lethbridge City Council sent a complaint to the Alberta Ombudsman regarding the decision by AHS to centralize ambulance dispatch services. Mayor Chris Spearman brought forward the motion along with the City of Red Deer and the Municipal District of Wood Buffalo. With Jason Copping taking over as Alberta's new health minister, Mayor Chris Spearman says he's hoping the complaint will change the mind of the provincial government.
That complaint is based on the subsequent results and the deterioration in services that has occurred in our communities and the risk to patients. So previously 5 consecutive health ministers rejected recommendations to centralize dispatch. The most recent health minister accepted that. This may provide an objective assessment of centralization by an independent third party.
Government officials say the consolidation of the EMS dispatch will save the province around $6 million annually. Lethbridge Family Services recently presented their Friend of the Family Award. Since 1988, over 100 people have been presented with the honor. The awards are given out to an individual or business owner who has showcased excellence here in Lethbridge.
Our work depends or reliant on the community, and many of our programs are actively engaging in the community to provide opportunity for individuals and businesses to participate and help our clients. And I think it's very unique award to acknowledge the excellent work that is being done by the community.
When we were younger, many of us dreamt about growing up to become a police officer, firefighter, professional athlete, or even a rock star. But in this next story, Naveen Day spoke with 2 elementary school students who want to become politicians when they grow up.
It's not every day that you meet children who want to pursue a career in politics. But here in Taber, a 7-year-old wants to become the town mayor, and a 10-year-old wants to follow the footsteps of Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder.
7-year-old Landon Dyke and 10-year-old Tenley Angermeyer were invited by Taber Mayor Andrew Prokop to tour the town council chambers and give them a feel of what a career in politics would be like. Landon says that his desire to become the town mayor began 2 years ago.
I was 5 years old when I wanted to be the mayor. And I wanted to be the mayor because I just wanted to try new things.
I remember that day when we came home and we were talking about it, and Landon was so interested in it right away. And I looked over at him, I'm like, you want to be the mayor? And he's like, yeah, I want to be the mayor. But I wasn't too surprised, just mainly because of who Landon is. He's always been drawn to people who have a heart to serve others.
If elected mayor, Landon says his first order of business is going to make life in Taber more affordable and more sweet.
I want to make something free. The free thing is free donut days. You get free donuts every Tuesday.
Tenley, however, has her sights set on Ottawa. She hopes to become the MP for Lethbridge and tackle social issues.
Everybody deserves to have everything that they need and help the homeless and the people who have special needs. Because everybody deserves to have a normal life as normal people do.
Mayor Prokop says it is encouraging to see children show an interest in politics at such a young age.
Well, obviously this is our future, and we're in very good hands going forward, and it's a thrill to me to see this kind of interest at this age.
Prokop says that it is important to introduce children to politics when they are young. He has given talks at schools to students as early as grade 2. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
I think it's safe to say that our future is in good hands. Eye health is very important, not only when we're younger, but as we get older as well. Coming up, we chat with an optometrist who has some tips in keeping our eyes safe and healthy. Stay with us.
Getting enough sun exposure, there's been some research into kids that didn't have as much sun exposure were more likely to become nearsighted.